What's going on, everybody? It's ETAPRIME back here again. Today we're going to be taking a look at the all-new AOKZOE A2. This is one I've had my eye on for a while, and originally when AOKZOE hit the scene, we didn't know much about them, but now we've got a good feel for what kind of devices they're putting out. The A2, which we have here, is a 7-inch bezel-less handheld gaming PC, and it's the predecessor to the original AOKZOE A1 with that much larger 8-inch display. I've had a chance to test this out for the past few days, and it's definitely a great performer. It's powered by a Ryzen 7 7840U, and as you can see, we've got a bezel-less display. This one's coming in at 7 inches. It's a beautiful IPS at 60 Hz. We've also got Hall-based triggers, Hall-based analog sticks, and overall, I do like the way this thing's set up. One thing I love to see added to these handhelds is a full-size USB port. Now, it might not seem like much to most people out there, but having that full-size USB really helps out when connecting different peripherals to your handheld. And along with that full-size USB, we've also got two USB 4.0 ports running at up to 40 gigs, so connecting an eGPU or really fast storage to this device is super easy with those new ports. Round back here, a little bit of ventilation, not much else going on around back here, but we've got that AOKZOE logo. Down at the bottom, again, we've got that USB 4 port running it up to 40 gigs, plus dual stereo speakers. And moving around to the top of the device, we've got our shoulder buttons and our triggers. These triggers are Hall-based, so they're very, very accurate, perfect for racing games. We also have our power button, our volume rocker, a 3.5mm audio jack, another USB 4 port, a full-size USB 3.2 port, and a micro SD card slot for adding extra storage. With the original AOKZOE, one thing that I really didn't like was the D-pad. As you can see here, it used the dish style, but now with the A2, we've got an upgraded D-pad, more of a traditional design. It does feel really good. It's got some nice roll to it, and we will be doing some testing in this video. They've also added full-sized Hall-based analog sticks with some RGB rings around them. This is fully controllable from software. And over here on the right-hand side, we've got our face buttons, A, B, X, Y. These are using a conductive pad underneath them. And at the very bottom, we've got two extra buttons plus an LED indicator. One of these is going to open up our control center or the AOKZOE control panel. This will allow us to tweak and tune everything on the device. I will go into depth with that in just a second. But we've also got a dedicated on-screen keyboard button. And when it comes to the overall specs of the new A2, for that APU, we've got the AMD Ryzen 7 7840U. Based on Zen 4, we've got 8 cores, 16 threads, a base clock of 3.3, and a boost up to 5.1. Along with this, we get those RDNA 3 graphics, so it's the Radeon 780M, 12 compute units up to 2700 MHz. You can get this with either 32 or 64 gigabytes of RAM, and they opted to use LPDDR5 at 7500 megatransfers per second. A beautiful 7-inch IPS display at 1200p, totally bezel-less, as you can see. They're also offering this up to 4 terabytes of storage right out of the door. This uses a 2280 Gen 4 M.2 NVMe SSD. I've got the 1 terabyte version here with 32 gigabytes of RAM. We also get Wi-Fi 6E, Bluetooth 5.2, a 48.5 watt-hour battery with 65 watt fast charging capabilities. Does come with a 65 watt charger in the box. Weight is around 649 grams, and this is running Windows 11 out of the box. The ergonomics of the new A2 are actually great. It sits right in your hand. It's really comfortable to hang on to for long periods of time. You can reach all of these buttons very easily. It's not a super thick boy, so it is really comfortable. Getting to these Hall analog sticks is great, and I'm glad that they used the full-size analog sticks here instead of, switch size. And just judging by the feel of the new D-pad, it's miles ahead of the original on the A1. Now, getting right down into the custom software, this does have the AOKZOE Game Center built in. We've got a game launcher, and we can fully customize the device, from the TDP to the button layout, the built-in gyro, vibration, and all you need to do to get there is press this dedicated button one time. It'll bring up our mini menu. Now from here, this is where we can customize everything, but if we hold it for 3 seconds, we can also be brought into the game launcher itself. I will give you a closer look at both of these in just a second, but I wanted to run through some of the RGB settings we have here. Now there are a bunch of presets that we can use. Give us kind of a cyberpunk vibe. We've got the rainbow vibe. You can go solid color on both sides if you want to. And from the mini menu, this is where we can access it at any time, even while we're playing a game. But yeah, so far, turning out to be a really comfortable handheld. Now I'm going to go ahead and plug this into my game capture just so we can take a look at the AOKZOE Game Center a bit closer. So with our physical button, dedicated button, pressing it once will bring up our mini menu, and from the top you can see that we've got our performance. So with this, we can actually go down to 4 watts and all the way up to 30 watts. Now, of course, you could use third-party application to up this if you wanted to, but up to 30 with this unit. I've been sitting at about 15 here. Fan control, automatic, and we've got some presets. Tapping the Y button will bring up our presets, and from here, we can actually set this up however we'd like. If we want to go to full speed, we can do it. It's really up to you. Got some curves that we can mess around with here. I'm going to go ahead and reset this one. From the vibration settings, we can totally disable it if we want to, set it up for a slight vibration or all the way up to fierce. I've just left it there. It's actually got some really good feedback. Change the resolution directly from here. Again, we've got our RGB control. We've also got a performance overlay that we can set up. This comes in really handy for just monitoring everything while you're playing a game, but you will need to install hardware info and Riva Tuner. It's got a link. As soon as you click on this, it'll bring it up. You can go directly to the website. CPU turbo, we can turn this on or off at any given time. This is great for saving battery life. A lot of the games that we play on these don't need that turbo up to 5.1 gigahertz, so you can always disable it from here. We can also set up the gyroscope, and there's lots of different ways that we can do this. We can have this simulate a mouse, Xbox controller, or PlayStation 4 controller. And really, when you get down in here, it's going to take a little bit of setup to get it where you like, but we've got a lot of stuff that we can mess around with here to get it exactly how you want it to feel. Change the brightness of the display, and of course, we've got our volume. Now again, holding that button for about 3 seconds will bring up our game launcher. We can have this automatically scan our default directories, so once we add new games, we can find them from here. This is what I've got installed on the internal storage right now. Going into a game, we've got some info about it. From the settings menu, we can add to favorite, we can hide the game, remove from list, or completely delete the game from our device. So we've basically got full control over our library. And keep in mind, this scans default directories for different game launchers like Steam, Epic, EA, and GOG. If you've got games stored in a different location, you can actually set this up to automatically scan that location if you want it to. While I was here, I figured I'd go ahead and run some GPU benchmarks with 3D Mark, and the first one here is Night Raid. We scored a 28,198. Fire Strike, we got a 7,312. And finally, we've got Time Spy with a 3,192. All three of these benchmarks were run at 28 watts, and we're right on par with other devices in this same chip, so we've got that 7840U, and yeah, I mean, I figured we'd be right about there, especially given that we have that 7,500 megatransfers per second RAM. And before we get into some gameplay, I did want to give you a quick size comparison here. I've got a couple other popular handhelds on the table, along with the AOKZOE A2. And the first one I wanted to compare it to was the AOKZOE A1. Now the A1 came in with an 8-inch display. It's a hoss. I mean, it's definitely a bigger handheld. As you can see, we've got that 7-inch display with the A2, and it's coming in a lot smaller. Next up, we've got the ROG Ally. It's pretty much on par with that same size. We've got a different shape to it, so the Ally might look a little larger, but overall, I mean, they're right there with each other. And of course, I wanted to compare it to the Steam Deck, so I've got the OLED Steam Deck here. And yeah, I mean, the Steam Deck is a larger handheld. A lot of people find it very comfortable, including myself. But if you're looking for something a bit smaller, the A2 might be a good choice. But now it's time to see how this thing really performs. So I've got Forza Horizon 5. We're at 1200p medium settings at 15 watts. Got Afterburner up in the top left-hand corner. And the sound on this is awesome. We've got those dual stereo speakers. Definitely gets much louder than I thought it would. And right now I wanted to test out these Hall-based triggers. These are some of my favorites for these racing games. When you're in there drifting, you've got total control over the gas and brake. As you can see, you can set this up with launch control. Actually feel really nice. Now again, we're at 15 watts, 1080p medium with Forza Horizon 5, and we're over 60 FPS. In fact, we got an average of 74 FPS with this game, which is more than enough. I would just go ahead, turn VSync on, have a good time with it. But of course, we can actually take the TDP up on this pretty easily and get a lot more out of it. But this will come with a runtime cost. Now we can go up to 30 watts on this, which is going to double that 15 watt TDP. It's going to draw a lot more from the battery. And I'll go ahead and stop real quick. We'll just hit that menu button, bring it up, easily go up to 30 watts here. And I do have turbo boost turned on. With a lot of these games, we won't need it, but I just wanted to see what we could really get out of this thing. You can see our FPS jumped up over 100. We actually got an average of 92 FPS at 30 watts, 1080p, medium settings with Forza Horizon 5. Here we have some GTA 5 1200p normal settings at 15 watts, and this is one of those games that does run really well with this RDNA 3i GPU. I'm getting an average of around 63 FPS with it the way it is right now. And to tell you the truth, on most of these devices in my free time, I set it at 18 watts. Just right there across the board, most of the games that I like to play will run just fine at 18 watts. In some cases, gives us a little extra. But if you wanted to save as much battery as possible, 15 watts is a nice sweet spot. Definitely had to show this new D-pad off, and they've really done a nice upgrade here. Originally on the A1, that was kind of my main complaint, and I thought maybe on the A2 Pro, which was released with the 7840U, they'd add a D-pad like this, but unfortunately they didn't. This one is so much better than the original A1, and it's really easy to pull off your favorite fighting moves. Love the roll, got some good movement to it. Here's Horizon Zero Dawn, just using the built-in benchmark 1080p original settings, 18 watt TDP. Again, this is usually how I run my handhelds with that 7840U. With it set up like this, we got an average of 65 FPS. Even though this RDNA 3i GPU is one of the most powerful on the market, there's still some games that struggle even at those higher wattages. Here's Mortal Kombat 1, and since the release, we've actually got some nice driver updates and game optimizations, which have really helped out. But right now, we're at 1080p low with FSR set to performance at 30 watts, and as you can see, it's still dipping under 60. And the final one I wanted to test here was Cyberpunk 2077, 800p, low settings, 15 watt TDP. And with these low settings, you do need to go in and turn everything to low in order to get this game to run over 60 on one of these APUs. But it still looks pretty good on these smaller displays, and we're getting an average of around 68 FPS at 15 watts, which really isn't that bad. But this game can run at 1080 or in this case 1200p on the 7840U. Unfortunately, it's not going to do it at 15 watts. So what I've done here is just taken it up to 1200p. I've upped the wattage on that APU to 30 watts. And if you take a look at Afterburner up in the top left hand corner, you can see we're getting an average of around 65 FPS. One of the most important things to a lot of people with these handhelds is battery life, so I wanted to do a little bit of testing here. I'm using Cyberpunk 2077 with an unlocked frame rate. At 15 watts, total battery draw is around 28 watts. Taking it up to 20 watts, that jumps to 35. And just from this, we can actually use some simple math to calculate battery life. We know what the total draw from the battery is, we know what size the battery is, and for instance, at 30 watts, we're now drawing 49.8 watts from the battery. So we can pretty accurately estimate battery life. Uncapped FPS, 100% screen brightness, and we've got that 48.2 watt hour battery. At a 15 watt TDP, total draw from the battery is 28.2 watts. That's going to net us around 103 minutes of runtime. 20 watt total draw is 35.4, around 82 minutes. And at 30 watts, we're drawing around 49.8 watts, which is right there at around 58 minutes, right under an hour at that really high wattage. So first impressions of the AOKZoe A2, I think they've done a pretty decent job with this one. Really glad to see that we've got a new D-pad design here as opposed to the A1. Love the look, love the feel. That bezel-less display looks great. It would have been nice if this was up to 120 Hz, but it's only at 60. And one thing I'd love to see in these future handhelds is a FreeSync or some type of variable refresh rate display. That way we don't have to worry about any kind of screen tearing, even going under that 60 FPS mark. And given that we're working with, low-powered iGPUs, I think that a lot of these really do need that. The chip they're using here has been used in several different handhelds, so we know what kind of performance to expect out of it, and it's right on par with the others. So when choosing one of these, a lot of the time it isn't coming down to performance, at least if they're using that 7840U. Really comes down to user preference, design, display. And I think for their second device to hit the market, AOKZoe did an awesome job with the A2. But that's going to wrap it up for my first look video. If you've got any questions or you want to see anything else running on this, let me know in the comments below. And if you want to learn a little more, maybe even back their Indiegogo, I'll leave links in the description. But I'd love to know your thoughts on this new handheld. Is this something you'd be interested in? Are you going to wait for a newer chip to hit the market? I'm not talking about the Ryzen 8000 that was already announced, because they're basically the same chip with the same iGPU. Let me know your thoughts down below. And like always, thanks for watching.